I think, Lavinia, as well, that brings us nicely to something I wanted to ask you about, which you included in one of the recent Offbeat newsletters, and that is this more wide-ranging view of curation. This idea that L&D isn't just responsible for bringing together resources, but also people and opportunities in the business, right? So maybe you could tell us a little bit more about that, and then we can bring in Ross and Nelson for their thoughts.
Yeah, of course. So I've been curating first content for a while now, and I think content curation has actually been with us for a while. But I also started thinking about curation from a networking point of view, right? As an L&D, you are connected to so many people in the organization, and you get the chance to know them, to understand their strengths, the projects they work with, their knowledge, and you can actually leverage that to facilitate social learning, right? What I've seen done in communities, Ana Maria is here and it's doing this amazingly, just tagging people and saying, oh, you have this question, I know someone that could help you, and we can do that inside our organizations. So that's one, curating people, like I say it. And then you have to think about careers, right? Curating for now roles for different people. If we're connected to our recruitment counterparts, for example, and we understand very, very well what they're looking for, at the same time, we have all kinds of programs where we meet people and we know, the skills they have and what they would like to do next in their jobs. So we can just go ahead and tell them, look, there's this opportunity. Would you be interested in it? And this can be, personalized, very personalized, or it can be at scale, right? Even having a newsletter where you send over different roles for people to just see and understand if it would match them. So these three, curating content, curating people, and curating opportunities, I think it can be the future of L&D.
Yeah, I suppose it's you don't always need to bring in a skill or even build a skill. You can just borrow it from someone else in the business. Ross and Nelson, do you have any sort of thoughts on what Lavinia just said there?
Yes, I think about curation in general, and it's an interesting one. Like Lavinia said, I think the whole world is curation nowadays, right? We've got like the biggest access to information libraries ever. It's really interesting for me because when I think about it specific in an L&D context, and I just play devil's advocate here, is that what I'm finding with organizations that I've kind of worked with in the past and organizations that I speak to today is that sometimes there is a over-reliance on curation within systems, within people curating stuff, and less around the quality of the curation, the actual, how is this curation solving a problem? And I think some of that, right, has come through the internet age with playlists from YouTube and Spotify and all these kind of places. It's really simple to go, oh, okay, I want this subject, and the tool will just go, here's a bunch of content. But is that content actually going to help you move the needle or solve the problem? Who is verifying that content? What's the quality of that content? And I see this, quite a lot within learning tech spaces and content libraries as well, where I think we've all had the kind of same issue before, where X amount of companies will say, I've got this content library with 100,000 pieces of content. It's going to rock your world and it's going to be amazing and do all this stuff, and it's going to build all these creative pathways for you. But then when you dig deeper underneath that, how good is that content? What is the quality of that content, that you are actually getting? And what is the quality of that content that is being curated into those pathways? So when people in an organization are saying, I want help with emotional intelligence, is probably a good example of that. And how do we make sure people are being taught the right habits, the right behaviors, and the systems that you want to put in place as an organization? Sometimes curation doesn't always fill that at a grand level, because there needs to be a human element of, and again, this is where context is king, right? Saying earlier on, when you're in your organization, you're looking at the content that's being curated from an L&D perspective, especially when I think about my world, I need to know that's the right content for the people in my business who are working on what we're working on as an organization in terms of strategy, in terms of our values, in terms of the way we behave. And that always doesn't get filled. So I think sometimes curation is great, but it can be chaotic. And it can be actually, how do you unpack that and actually say, how do we do this right? So we're giving people the right stuff not just more stuff, because fundamentally then you're just becoming a search engine which just putting in loads of stuff. And how many times do we do that classic thing where any of us are ill, we go to Google, we doom scroll, Google gives us the ultimate curation playlist of you're going to die, you're going to die, oh guess what, this will happen, then you're going to die. So there's always like stuff like that where it doesn't help anyone. So I think I love curation, but I think there's also an asterisk on, curate with care. So actually look at how does that affect, because what you don't want to do at the end of the year, you go speak to your senior team and like, cool, we've given you X amount of investment. You're talking about all of this stuff with, curation and digital technology, what we love. How has that impacted the performance of our organization? And actually, how can you tell us as the operator in the L&D world, has that content raised the level of the skills and actually the capability that people have today? And I think most of the time with some of the stuff that's out there, I think it's a no, because it's not curated to the right level with care in the organization. So yeah, I'm playing devil's advocate, right? But it's like there is that bit with curation, but doing it with care, as I say. And I think the other element, just to continue on the kind of skills bit, which was kind of came into my head when we were talking about it, is that I think we've all seen those job specs where, it's like 400 skills are on there and you need 15 years experience. And, you've got to do all this stuff with God knows what technology, and it's completely not feasible. And I think, like Lavinia said, most of the time companies are trying to find a catch-all of superstars who can do all that stuff. And I can tell you, I'm a head of L&D now, and I've been doing this 15 years. There is no way in hell I've even got half of those skills that they're asking for on most of those things. So again, it is one of those bits where pick your 5 top bits, get really good at them, and you just make that your kind of brand, as Nelson says. Don't be trying to solve everything for the world pretty much. But yeah, curate with care. And like I say, context on the skills piece.
And kind of historically, L&D have been a bit of a production facility, right? And not just historically, I mean, even till this day, how L&D have demonstrated value is from how much they produce, right? So I would demonstrate my value by saying, look, we created 100 training programs this year. Look how great we are. And so it's been very output focused. And that's come at the cost of time to address the business problem, right? So in terms of priorities, they've prioritized creating a larger volume of training programs and content at the risk of, actually, the problem was 3 months ago. Great, we have the most perfect training program in the world, but that problem has already done the damage it needed to do to the business, whereas that can't go on. Right. And the business is aware of this. And that's what the pressure is. L&D, now the C-suite are essentially asking, we have these business challenges. How can this L&D function help us solve this business challenge? And when you're having that conversation, the time to solve the problem, and as a result, the relevance to the moment of need, is far more of a priority than the volume of content you're creating. And when the time to solving the business challenge is more of a priority, curation is key, right? And we've all familiar with the age-old saying of content is king, but actually curation is queen, and it's very much her reign right now. And because in a world of content abundance, the problem isn't content anymore. The problem isn't that you didn't create content. It's discovery of content at the right moment of need is the biggest challenge. And so the question is, how are L&D going to help solve that problem? And one of the ways they do that is through curation. And absolutely, like Ross said, it is curation with care. But if you're setting the right guidelines and the right framework, and you're leveraging your community, and an important thing to point out here, when we're saying curation, it isn't about L&D being the owner of curation and L&D decides what's right for every single person in the company. That's not what we're saying. What we're saying here is to set the guidelines and the tech infrastructure and to enable curation to happen at scale within the organization. Because if I'm a part of the marketing team and other marketeers are filtering out and sharing things that are relevant, that is a form of curation. Because rather than looking at the world of the internet, they are essentially acting as curators to kind of bring to the top the things that are most relevant to me in the context of my organization and team. So L&D are essentially enabling curation rather than being the curators all the time within the organization.